This video is about price analysis, theories and techniques that help in price analysis. Imagine you are a supply manager of a big organization, and a part of your fiduciary responsibility is to do procurement efficiently, which means you will be doing procurement and buying things, supplies from different suppliers all over the world at a low price. Now, how do you make sure that when you are buying something from supplier, that suppliers are charging you fairly or are they ripping you off? How do you determine this? How do you make these type of decisions? So the answer to this question will be given in this video. Before we jump into theories and techniques of price analysis, let's first have an overview of how markets work. What's a supplier market and what's a buyer market? We have this is a graph, and in this graph there is volume on x-axis, and on y-axis it's price. And we have this line, this green color line, that represents demand. Now, as you can see here, that for the demand line, when price is high, so this is high price. At that high price, volume is low, which means when price is high, then demand volume is low. And it's very intuitive because when prices are high, customers are not willing to buy something. And on the other side of this line, when price is low, at this point, price is low. As you can see here, this is low price and volume is high, which means when price drops, demand volume increases because more people are willing to buy a thing at a lower price. And then we have this supply line. And for supply line, as you can see, this red color line. And in this line, you can see a point when price is low, then supply volume is also low. This means that when market price of a product is low, then less number of suppliers are willing to bring their product to the market, and therefore supply volume would be low. And on the other end of this line, here you can see when price is high, so you can see here price is high, then supply volume is also high. And that makes sense because when price is high, more and more suppliers are willing to bring their product to the market because they know that the product is selling at a high price and they want to make profit. So this is called as supply and demand. Now, there is one intersection here. Now, this point, intersection where supply and demand line, they intersect each other. This point is called as equilibrium point. Now, on the left side of this point, we have supplier market, and on the right side, we have buyer market. Now, this means that, for instance, in this area, on the left side of this point, we know that demand is high and supply is low. So therefore, supplier find it more lucrative because they know that demand is high. And therefore, this type of situation or scenario is very conducive to suppliers because they would bring more product to market to take advantage of this demand which is higher than supply. And on the other side, on the right side of this intersection, we have buyer market. So buyer market is the one whereby supply is high in the market but demand is low. So this market is suitable for buyers because they know that market's flooded with supply, there's more supply than demand, and that increases the negotiation power of the buyer because because there's more supply in the market and there is less demand, so they would be willing to buy that product and they know that they can negotiate, and therefore this region is called as buyer market. So a supply manager needs to keep this thing in mind. Prices fluctuate, that it's a function of supply and demand. Another thing that determines prices of products is this market structure type, whereby we have two types, monopoly and oligopoly. So in monopoly, there's a single supplier market and there's a unique product with no substitutes. So one example of monopoly is utility companies that provide electricity and gas related services or water. So these utility companies, they usually have monopoly. And then the other one is oligopoly, whereby a few large suppliers dominate the market. Now we know, for example, in the US, there are few telecom companies such as T-Mobile, AT&T, and T, and Verizon, etc. There are very few companies. Similarly, there are very few technology companies like Amazon, Google, and Facebook, etc. And as a result of that, prices may be different, what you can expect. So, in an ideal situation, there should be several suppliers and there should be healthy competition. However, if that ideal condition does not exist, and if there is a monopoly or oligopoly, then you can expect that prices might be higher. This is a function of supply and demand. Then the next thing is that how is price determined? There are three elements. One thing is called as direct cost. In direct cost, when a supplier is selling a product, for their product, of course, they are using some material. They are also using labor, which means their human resources. And then they are also spending resources on other overhead. For example, supplier might be paying for their lease, insurance, rents, and other type of utilities. And all these things, they constitute overhead. So when a supplier is manufacturing something, the cost of product, it builds upon these three things: material cost, labor cost, and production overhead. And these three costs, they are called as direct cost. And to these direct costs, when you add selling and administrative cost, that is called as supplier's total cost. So this point up to these three things, they constitute direct cost. And when to this direct cost you add selling and administrative cost, that becomes total supplier cost. And then a supplier would add their profit, how much profit they want. And when they add this element, then that becomes the final price that is charged to the buyer. An understanding of this price structure is important because you don't know if the price is fair or unfair. You can split it down. You can determine that, okay, what could be the material cost, how much material has been used in this thing, how much labor cost could be, what could be possible production overhead, what could be selling and administration cost, and what about profit margin. So in this way you can have an idea that if a supplier is charging you a fair price or unfair. Now, when we determine price, for example, again, I remember the background is that you are a supply manager and it is your responsibility that you do due diligence. As a part of due diligence, you have to make sure that the price is fair and you are not being ripped off. How do you do that? So for that purpose, we use four type of strategies, and these are different type of classes. And within each class, there are multiple type of techniques, and we are going to discuss all of them one by one. So the first thing is called as market-based pricing model. So over here, the keyword is pricing. Producer price index, which is more like a macroeconomic indicator. We use that, and then we use some hedging models to protect yourself from fluctuations in prices. And then there are cost-based models where you make a decision based on cost. So the first thing is market-driven pricing model. In market-driven pricing model, first one is called as price volume model. So in price volume model, it's basically a supplier is looking for a combination of volume and price. They want to know that how much they need to produce and what should be the price. And then based on that, they set the price. The idea is that when you are producing something in large quantity, then your cost, they are spread over large number of units, and therefore you can charge lower price. Now I want to give you here one example of price volume model. For example, if you want to buy a laptop or a computer, you have a number of options. If you buy a laptop from Walmart or Best Buy, now, of course, your options are reduced, which means you don't have much choices. You can only buy what is available there on the store. For example, if there's a laptop that has i3 processor, then you don't have choice. You cannot upgrade it to i5 or i7 or i9 processor. That's not possible. Now, at the end of the company, what the company was thinking when they placed their laptops on the shelves in Walmart, they determined that if we make a standardized type of model is sufficient to meet the needs of a large number of customers, and they produce that laptop in bulk and then they sell it at a lower price, that would work perfectly, because when they are producing several thousands or several hundreds of thousands of laptop, then which mean their cost, for example their fixed cost, is distributed over that large number and they are able to maintain a lower price. Then the next thing is called as market share model. Now in market share model, a company is only looking for entry into the market, which means they just want to penetrate the market, and for that purpose their profit margin could be low, because their objective is not to make big profit. They are looking for just making an entry in the market. However, at a later stage, they may increase their prices. In the initial stage, they would be okay. Even if they have to take losses, they would be fine with that, because they know that at a later stage, once their entry is successful, then they can increase prices. Now, a supply manager, as a buyer, the responsibility of a supply manager is to understand that this type of model may not be sustainable. Which means if you are buying from a supplier who are using this type of model, it may not work in the long run. It may work in the short run, which means because a supplier is only seeking to enter the market, but it will not sustain, because in the long run, it is not feasible for them to operate at this low price and they would be increasing their prices. In market skimming model, a supplier is looking for high profit margin. So they are charging a high price. One of the keyword here is this backdoor approach, which means one of the marketing agent of the supplier can contact quality manager, production manager, accounts manager, human resource manager, and other type of people, and they can convince them to buy from them. And because those people, for example, those people who are not supply manager, they are not professional, they are not trained, they are not expert in this area, they may end up buying from the supplier at a high price. And that's exactly what the supplier wants. Now, being a supply manager, your responsibility is to minimize this type of practice, which means you develop policies that whenever somebody wants to buy something, then that must go through supply manager, because supply manager is the one who is trained in this field, who is an expert in this area. They know how to negotiate, they know how to determine prices. Therefore, one of the responsibility of a supply manager is to engage in transaction themselves and making sure that other people, they engage in transactions through supply manager. And the next one is a revenue pricing model. A supplier is willing to charge a low price, and one of the keyword over here is downturns. For example, let's say when economy is down, or when a supplier is facing very tough competition. In this case, a supplier is not very much interested in making huge profit. Their only purpose is to keep their processes running, keep the business running, and therefore they are charging a relatively low price. So their profit is not a priority, but their revenue is. Then the next model is promotional pricing model. In promotional pricing model, a supplier offers some sort of promotion. Their overall focus is on the overall product line. Example could be a printer. Every time you buy a printer, there will be cartridge that's half filled, and that cartridge finish in just a few days. And then after that, you will have to buy a new cartridge. You are bound to keep buying cartridges as long as you want to use printers. The next one is competition pricing model. In competition pricing model, a supplier just wants to beat their competitor. So their objective is to offer the lowest price. The last one is cash discounts. This is another strategy that's used by supply manager. So supply manager, they will use this strategy approach that's that's called as 210 net 30. And the numbers can change, which mean that you will be offered a discount of 2% if you pay within 10 days, and the total time to make this payment is 30 days. It can also be like 510 or 515 net 60. But the idea is that a supplier stipulates that if you make a payment earlier, for example, within 10 days, then you will be offered a discount of 2%. And the normal time of payment is 30 days. So in this case, a supplier makes sure they are getting access to cash early, and a buyer gets a benefit by getting some discount. Now, another technique that's usually used for this purpose is called as using producer price index. Now, let me give you a little bit idea what's a producer price index. Especially this term is especially very relevant nowadays and in the last year in 2023 when we were almost on the brink of recession and inflation was very high and Fed was increasing interest rate throughout 2023, and in 2024 Fed has to reduce interest rate. A producer or a wholesaler, they are buying something from their supplier. This is something that's related to producer price index, which means how much price they pay. A supplier may increase prices. In some cases, it may be justified. In other cases, it may not be justified. How to determine if this price increase is justified or not, and how much increase would be justified? Now, this PPI, that's producer price index, it tells us if this increase is justified or not. The idea is that, for instance, if you figure out that the increase in PPI over the last a year or last 5 years was 2%, and the supplier is increasing a price by 5% or 10%, then supplier owes an explanation. In any case, PPI gives an indication that if price increase by supplier, is it justified or not? Then the next thing that we are going to discuss is about hedging tools. So there are different type of hedging tools that are used to protect yourself from price fluctuations. You know the idea of hedge. For instance, you may be having a hedge outside your house, and that hedge protects you and your house from any type of danger. Now, in case of hedging, we have different options. The idea is that prices keep changing. Sometimes prices go up and sometimes prices go down. If prices go down, maybe you can benefit, but if prices go up, that will also increase your cost. And when it increases your material cost, the prices of your product will go up. And when prices of your product they go up, then it reduces your competitiveness. So therefore, you want to control this thing. You do not want prices to go up. And therefore, you want to make some arrangement whereby you minimize the impact of price fluctuation on your operations. And this is the idea that underpins hedging. And in this case, we use three type of hedging tools. The first one is called as fixed price swap. Now, in this fixed price swap, you have an agreement, you as a buyer has an agreement with the supplier that they will be buying from the same supplier at a fixed price. So this is the fixed price. This red color line, that is the hedge, which means we will be paying this much. No matter prices go down, no matter prices go up, a buyer will be buying from the supplier at a fixed price. Imagine this is $100. Prices go down. Now, because this is an agreement, because you have set up a hedge, so you will be paying 100. Irrespective of prices going down or up, you are only obligated to pay $100. Let's say, for example, prices go to $90, which means at this point, then customer pays difference, which mean that while the market price is 90, you are paying $100, which mean you are paying a little bit more. The difference, that's $10, you are paying more. Similarly, if prices go up, for example, let's say if prices go to $110, at this point, you are paying only $100, which means you are saving $10 here. Then there is another hedging technique that's called as customer buys a call option. So in this case, again, this red line, it represents a hedge. So the idea of this buying a call option is that you have an agreement with the supplier that okay, this is the hedge, which means you will be buying at this price. This is a strike price. For example, let's say we say this is $100. If prices go down, then customer will be participating in this benefit. They will also be paying less. However, on the other hand, if prices go up, then you are required only to pay $100. In other words, customer is potentially receiving a benefit of $10. And then the last type of hedging approach is called as a collar approach or zero cost collar, whereby, for example, there is a range. Let's say there is one range and here is another range, which means a customer is obligated to pay only within this range, which means the upper range that's also set and the low range is also predefined. If prices go down, then this range, then it doesn't affect you because this is the one that you are required to pay. Although market price could be low, but you will be paying this much. So in this case, you can say customer pays the difference. For example, let's say, suppose if I say this is 90, which means the lower range is 90, but actual market price is 80. So in other words, you are like paying a $10 more, I mean, compared to the market. But let's say if we look at the other scenario, if prices go up, let's say to $110. Now, in this case, if I say this is $100, it doesn't matter how high prices go, you are required to pay only $100. Now, in this case, customer receives a difference of about $10 by paying $10 less than the market price. And again, the idea, the benefit of these hedging tools is that because in any market condition, prices fluctuate for a number of reasons. You want to hedge yourself against these fluctuations. The fourth technique is called as cost analysis technique. In cost analysis technique, you make a decision about cost, whether the price being charged by the supplier, is it fair? In this model, there are two things. One thing is cost, and the other thing is markup. We know that the cost is a function of three things. So first thing is material cost, as we discussed earlier. Then the second thing was labor cost. And the third component was selling and administrative cost. So that is your cost. And to this cost, you will add up markup. And that will become the price that you will charge to buyer. So for example, if we say that your cost is $50 and you are contemplating that how much price should you charge to buyer. Okay, if price is $50 and you say, okay, 20% markup, I'm gonna charge. So 50 plus 20% of 50, and 20% of 50 is 10. So 50 plus 10 will be equal to 60. Then the next thing is margin model. In margin model, sometimes suppliers they say that I want to add 20% profit margin on the sales price, which means whatever is the sales price, I want my 20% dollar. So in this case, we use this formula. That's cost divided by 1 minus margin rate, and that's equal to unit selling price. So for example, again, let's say cost is $50 and here is cost. And you say your margin rate is 20%. So 1 minus 20% will be 80%. So $50 divided by 80% is equal to 62.5. So your price will be 62.5 if you're using this margin model. And the last one is rate of return model. In a rate of return model, the idea is that you want to incorporate or you want to harvest your investment. You have already made an investment and you want to reap that. So assume the supplier wants a 20% return on its investment of $300,000 to produce 4,000 units. Then you'll be using this formula that this is the cost of $50, and then 20% of your investment, you want to produce 4,000 units. So the price will become $65. Next thing is Product specification. So the idea of product specification is that supply manager needs to keep this thing in mind that if you are customizing a product and if you are adding more specification, the product will become costly. Now, for example, earlier I was giving you an example that if you want to buy a laptop from a Walmart or from Best Buy, then you don't have many options there, which means you will have to buy whatever is available on their shelves. If you want to upgrade it, then it means you will go directly to the website of Apple if you want to buy a MacBook, or if you want to buy a laptop from Dell or HP maybe, then you will go on their website and then you can customize that. Every time you add a new feature, a new version of processor, more RAM, more hard disk, your product becomes more expensive. This is something that a supply manager needs to consider, that if they are asking more customization, then their product will become expensive. And if they want to buy that product economically at a lower price, then they need to go for more standardized components. And the next thing is reverse price analysis. So the idea of reverse price analysis is pretty much similar to the analogy of reverse engineering. Reverse engineering is a tool in which if a competitor they want to make a product, they will reverse engineer a product that's already in the market. So they will start with a finished product and they will start dismantling it. So using the same logic, a reverse price analysis is used. For example, you want to buy something and a supplier has quoted a price of $20. No, you don't know that is $20 fair price or unfair, because maybe it is a type of product that's very unique. It does not exist in the market. There are not many competitors available. So you have absolutely no idea if this $20 price that is being charged to you, is it fair or unfair? In this case, you will do a reverse price analysis. You start with $20 and then you say, okay, normally services, sales, and general and administrative allowances, these type of costs, they can be 15%. Okay, what is 15% of 20? That is 3. So which means you subtract 3 from 20 and that becomes 17. So which means you have subtracted one cost. That you can say maybe it's cost of selling and administrative cost, etc. Then the next thing is material. How much material is being used? And suppose you find that the material cost, it could be maximum $4. Okay. So subtract this direct material cost of 17 minus 4, and you are left with $13. Which means so far you started with the price and then you subtracted this cost of selling and other type of cost. You also subtracted direct material cost, and now you also subtract labor cost, that how much labor cost might have gone into developing this product. And let's say it is 3. Okay, subtract that 3 from 13. So 13 minus 3 is equal to $10. Now, at the end of the day, you are left with $10, and now you have to make a decision about this $10. Is it fair or not fair? Because you have subtracted every type of cost that the supplier might have incurred. Now, usually what happens, there are some guidelines. Overhead is generally expressed as a percentage of labor cost. So which means 10 divided by 3 multiplied by 100, and that will be 333%. So which means that this one overhead or manufacturing burden is 333% of direct labor cost. Now, many trade journals or magazines, they will tell you that depending upon what type of company it is, if it's a labor intensive company, then this ratio should be 150%. If it's a capital intensive industry, which means they are using more machines, they are using some very sophisticated systems and machines, for example, very high quality processors, then this could be 600%. Now you ask yourself that the product that you are buying from supplier, is it labor intensive or capital intensive? If it's a labor intensive, then this ratio should have been 150%. But in this case, it turns out to be 333%, which is almost more than double. In this case, so if your supplier is labor intensive, this would mean that the price that you are being charged is not fair. And the last technique is called as break-even analysis. The idea of break even is that break even is basically the volume or quantity. Again, the volume or quantity, not the dollar amount. So break even is the volume or quantity at which your revenues and your cost they are equal. And when your revenues and cost are equal, how much is your profit? Zero. So this is a formula for break even, which means how many units you will be producing when your revenues and cost are equal. This is the formula, which means you substitute this one with a fixed cost and price per unit and then variable cost per unit, and that will give you break even. Now, this is the formula, a general formula. It can be tweaked. For example, let's say if we do here one example, it says a business has a fixed cost of $30,000. Okay, so that is fixed cost. Additionally, the business incurs a variable cost of $6 per unit. So that's variable cost, which means the cost of making every unit. And the supplier is contemplating a price of $10. So the supplier is thinking, should they charge $10? What would be the break-even point? And if we enter all these values in this formula, fixed cost that is 30,000, price is $10 and variable cost is $6. So 30,000 here, this is 30,000 and divided by 10 minus 6, which is 4, equal to 7,500 units. Which means in this case, with all these values, with all these contingencies, if the company, if the supplier makes 7,500 units, that will be the break-even point, which essentially means that at 7,500 units, profit is equal to zero. If they make less than 7,500 units, they will be in a loss. If they make more than 7,500 units, that will be a profit. Now, here is a graph that further explains this thing. Now, in this graph, here's volume, the quantity that you are producing, and here is a dollar amount. And there are two lines. This red color line, it represents revenues, and this yellow color line that represents cost. And this is a point that's 7,500 point. So at this point, exactly as you can see, the red line that represents revenue and the yellow line that represents cost, they are equal. However, if you go below that point, then your cost will be high compared to your revenues, and you will be going in a loss. But when you surpass this point, 7,500, then your profits are more than your cost. And the difference of these two, which mean your cost and your revenue, this difference, that constitutes profit. So that is your profit. So the idea of break even is that break even gives you an idea of the minimum volume that is needed to be made. And if you make less than 7,500, you would go in a loss. So for example, here we have this data that's target price is $10, fixed price is $30,000, and variable cost is $6 per unit, and forecast purchase volume is 9,000. If I substitute all these values in this formula, which is again obtained by just tweaking the break-even formula, which means if we substitute that value, then it shows that this is our $10, that's a profit. And if demand is 9,000, in other words, you're producing 9,000, this is the same 9,000. $6 is the variable cost and 30,000 is the fixed cost, then your profit will be $6,000. And if you want to calculate break even, which means the point at which your profit will be zero, then that will become this demand, or the amount that you will be producing will become 7,500. So at 7,500, your profit is zero. But when you are making 9,000, then you are making a profit of 6,000. So break-even analysis gives you an overall idea that what you should do, how much you should produce, how much you should charge. And once you have this nuanced understanding of how prices work, how volume works, then you can make better decisions about cost. Then you can know if the price being charged by a supplier, is it fair or is it a rip off?